Hey everyone, today we're going to learn how to wax a snowboard. We're going to start off with the tools that we need. First you need a waxing specific iron, one where you can adjust the temperatures. You can use the ones with the holes in them, but it's best to use a specific one. You'll be able to wax the snowboard much better. You need a tool with a number 3 Phillips. You need wax, preferably temp specific, if not all temp will do. A brass brush, an SOS pad, and a scraper. And if you have one too, a file to sharpen the scraper on throughout the waxing process. Okay, so first thing that we gotta do is we gotta back off the screws from the bindings just a little bit. You can remove the whole binding if you want, it's not really necessary, but it is a good idea to at least back the screws off just a little bit, because when you're waxing on the bottom of the board underneath the bindings, it'll suck it in. It'll be a lot harder to scrape afterwards. You want to do just enough so it loses the grip, so when you're turning your tool, it's retightening it. Just enough to get a little bit loose. If you get it too loose, you'll screw up your angles and you have to redo them after. Okay, so now we're going to start off with removing the old wax and dirt from the snowboard. You're going to grab your scraper. Just go throughout the whole board. You want to do it in one motion. If you scrape back and forth, it will end up happening sometimes. You'll make little indents in your base. It's not a huge deal, but it doesn't help the board either. So, and when you're doing this, you're going to be removing very little wax. There shouldn't be very much wax on here to begin with. You're just getting whatever's left over from previous wax jobs and all that. And once you get the majority out, when you notice there's not too much wax coming off anymore, you can be a little extra and grab the brass brush. This isn't necessary, but it does help remove any other crap that could be stuck inside the base. And just the same as the scraper, just one motion. And depending on how dirty your board is, you'll notice a lot of stuff. Maybe you won't notice any at all. But it is good to do every now and then. You don't have to do this for every wax job. Preferably beginning of the season, ending of the season, and maybe in between if you haven't waxed it for a month or two. Okay, so now that we finished scraping the board, we're going to grab a rag, wipe down the board, get rid of any loose shavings, because you don't want to put it back into the board when you're waxing it. It's all garbage. Now that that's done, we're going to grab our wax, our iron. Now depending on the type of wax you have, it may say what temp you're supposed to set the iron to. If it doesn't, I generally find between 120 and 140 degrees is a good temperature to go for. You typically want it to be as hot as possible without the wax smoking. If the wax starts smoking, you're going to want to turn it down just a notch. So what I like to do, after I set my iron, if you look, most irons should have this. The little light will be red. When the light's red, that means it's heating up, so you have to wait. So while it's heating up, what you can do is, it's not necessary, but it helps spread the wax a bit better. Just give the board a little dry run with wax. Now, if you have different types of wax, it's good. What I like to do is, I like to put cold temp on the edges, and then all temp or medium temp in the middle. The reason for that being is because with when you're snowboarding, you're mostly on your edges, so you're going to burn out the edges a lot faster in the middle of the board. The cold temp is going to be a harder wax, so it'll actually last longer. This way, even though your edges are getting more contact, they should wear down at the same time as the middle of your board, give you more time in between waxes before you have to wax again. My iron's ready now, the light turned off. So you're going to grab your wax and hold it on the iron, let it melt, and you're just going to drip it onto the base. You don't want to do it as even as possible. There's no set amount you have to put on. If the more the better, I guess. As you do this more and more, you'll find a good point to how much you have to put on. If you put on too much, you just scrape it off anyway, so it's not a big deal. If you put on too little though, then there's going to be problems. So first couple times, just get it all over there. Okay, so now I have my base all waxed up. First step I'm going to do, I'm just going to spread the wax. So you're going to grab your iron, circular motions. Just want to spread that wax out as much as possible. Now, if you can hear that scraping sound, that indicates there's not enough wax in that spot. If you circle your iron around a bit, it should even it out. If it doesn't, just grab your wax, rub a little on the iron, and you should be okay. So at this point, we're not going to worry too much about heating the board up very much. All we want to do is spread the wax out. We got everything spread out. Now we're going to go over the whole board nice and slow. We're going to try to get the waxing as deep in the pores as possible. Now what I like to do is I like to do the board in sections, so the tip, the middle, and the tail. So it's almost the same as before. But this time instead of going all over the board, you're going to go nice and slow. Now while you're doing this, you're going to want to keep your hand underneath the board. The reason for this is you want to get the board as hot as possible without damaging it. And the way to do that is as soon as you can feel the top sheet getting warm, you have to move on to the next part of the board. So just go nice and slow, and if you look closely, you'll actually see little air bubbles in the wax. That's the pores inside the base opening up and the wax being sucked inside. And right over here in this part where the bindings are, if we didn't back them off right now, you'll have dry spots or a big pool of wax, either or, which is not a good thing. Okay, so now wait about a couple hours for the wax to harden up. It's as long as we want to wait. Before we start scraping it though, we're going to sharpen up the scraper. Just give it a quick sharpen. Let's make it nice and easy. Sometimes you have to do this once or twice during the scraping process. It just makes it go a lot faster. You want to go in one motion to avoid damaging the base as much as possible. So we'll start at the tip, work my way down. The sturdier your table is, the better. We kind of rigged ours a little cheap, but when you're doing this, you want to scrape off as much wax as possible. You pretty much don't want any wax on the surface. Only wax you want to be on the board is inside the pores. Anything left on the surface will actually slow you down. So. I didn't mention before I was waxing the snowboard, but you only want to wax up until the board starts curving, because you're not going to be snowboarding on this part of the snowboard anyways, so there really is no need. Plus it's kind of a pain to have to scrape it off if you do put wax on there. So scraping the other way to get this side. You want to keep scraping until there's almost nothing coming off pretty much. As you can see, there's next to little or no wax coming off now. Do a couple more passes, and then we'll move on to the finishing steps. If you want, you can feel around, make sure there's no bumps. Now we got most of the wax off. Give another wipe down with the rag.
Don't forget the edges.
Sometimes you have a little bit of wax on the edges. It's not really a big deal. I mean, it'll come off when you're snowboarding too. So, don't have to worry too much about it. You can take your Scotch-Brite pad and you're just going to polish off the base now. This is very fine, but what's going to do is it's going to make it that much better. It'll make you, it'll add a little bit of texture to the base. And also, it'll get rid of all the little bit of wax you miss while you're scraping. If you see any shiny parts, that usually indicates excess wax. Try to go over it a little bit more with the Scotch-Brite pad. You'll probably be Scotch-Brite where your bindings are the most, especially if you didn't back up the screws earlier, just because, like I said, usually tends to be a lot of wax build up in those spots because the bindings suck it in a bit. It's harder to scrape. One last wipe down. That's it. Fresh wax job. You passing all the noobs on the hill. Good to go. Shaggy to dope out.